The movie screen is a window into another world. A world of magical possibilities, endless possibilities, with the only limit being the imagination of the writer. After watching a lot of movies, you start to notice patterns in the way that stories are told. This isn't a bad thing, because this story structure has been used for hundreds of years at this point. Every movie is divided into multiple parts that all serve their own purpose. But you might be asking, what purpose do they serve? What are these parts? What is the most important part? Well, I'm glad you asked, dear viewer. So grab some popcorn, sit down, and enjoy while we go into the most important part of every movie. Before we get into the most important part of every movie, it first makes sense to start with what each part actually is. So you start with Act 1, where you're given exposition to understand the story being told. The main protagonist is introduced along with the antagonist. The setting is established and we're given the motives of the characters involved. This segment ends with the inciting incident that propels Act 2, where the characters deal with the repercussions of the inciting incident, conflict, and other various difficulties along the way. Tensions go up with the rising action, leading into Act 3, where the action leads to a climax. This usually takes the form of a final stand or a final confrontation of sorts. Then comes the falling action, where everything slows down back to normal, and the resolution, where now that everything has been dealt with, the characters can live happily ever after. The end. Now, honest question, dear viewer. Does that remind you of any movie in particular? Well, it should, because this story structure has been used for pretty much everything. I'm talking television, books, stage plays, video games, campfire stories. Whenever we're watching a movie, it could be any movie, but my father usually tends to leave after 20 minutes. And for years, I never knew why. All that I noticed is that for the majority of the movies that he leaves, it usually ends up being complete dog shit. And he just knew it from the very beginning. Come to think of it, I actually could have saved plenty of hours of my life if I just walked away whenever my dad did, instead of wasting my time on a bad movie. But that being said, I'm a college student and I study film and television, so the only reason I keep watching a bad movie is to accurately understand and critique it and be a part of the conversation. But for the majority of people that just want a good movie, that's not really a good reason to keep watching, right? The reality is that people go to movies to be entertained, and within the first 20 minutes, we should be entertained. We should care, and the best way to do that is to start off strong. If the first 20 minutes are not enough to captivate an audience, then what does that say about the rest of the movie? Because the beginning of the movie sets a baseline expectation of how the rest of it's supposed to go. If I don't like the first 20 minutes, why should I keep watching? Is it going to get better after 40 minutes? 50 minutes? An hour and a half? Do I need to watch the entire movie just to watch the ending to be entertained? I don't think that's a good way to be viewing it. If the first 20 minutes are not good, I don't think the rest of the movie is usually going to be worth watching. Your typical 2.5-hour Hollywood blockbuster has a budget of around $200 million. Break it down by minute. If a movie is 2.5 hours, so 150 minutes, and the budget is $200 million, then the first 20 minutes are worth $26.67 million. What I'm trying to say is after 20 minutes, we should all give a shit. The opening of a film is supposed to set a standard of how the rest of it's gonna go. This is when we're supposed to get invested in the story. To take some of my favorite films as an example of how to start off a movie great, in just 20 minutes, Princess Leia sends the Death Star plans down to Tatooine. Indiana Jones finished his first adventure. Hiccup shot down Toothless. Trinity narrowly escaped the Matrix and meets Neo. Harry Potter got accepted to Hogwarts. Marty McFly got introduced to the DeLorean time machine. Tony Stark got captured and implanted with the arc reactor. And Jack Sparrow became wanted by the British government. All of these events happened within the first 20 minutes, and at that point, we already care. We're already interested. We're already invested in what's going to happen next with these characters. And granted, movies that are longer might take a little bit longer to get to the point, but that's understandable. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of movies that are over 3 hours, but that's a topic for another video. Just because the beginning of a movie is very good, it doesn't mean the rest of the movie is also going to be very good. Sometimes writers will dupe the audience with a very good intro, and then just completely 180 the movie and the rest of it's boring. I've seen this happen a few times. Really good example, Star Wars The Phantom Menace. It starts out very good. We get to see the Jedi in action, we get to see them doing business, They get into a battle that progressively gets harder and harder, and eventually they have to retreat because it just gets too much for them. And then they have to come back and save a princess before narrowly escaping the planet, and then it just drops the ball. The next hour of the movie is boring as hell. The pod race is fine. That's about it. And the ending is good enough that it convinced a lot of people to just ignore how dogshit Act 2 is and like the movie overall. Let me ask you this. If a movie has a very good ending, does it excuse Act 2 being shit? I don't think so. To be fair, this is just one movie. And yes, before you say it, yeah, I know not every single movie is action, so it wouldn't make sense to start out with an action scene. So what's a fair equivalent for a different genre? Well, I'm glad you asked. A great recent example of how to start off a movie and keep up the momentum is The Greatest Showman. The movie is about a literal showman, so it wouldn't make sense to start off boring. The audience already knows this is a musical, so give them that. Give them what they want. Within the first minute, we get exactly that, and it transitions perfectly into the beginning of his story. We see the man that P.T. Barnum will eventually become, and then it fades to show his humble beginnings. And the rest of the movie builds on and exceeds the opening. This is how it's done. This is how you start a movie. Another great example, It Chapter 1. Look at the genre, give them that, and exceed it at the end of the movie. It's that simple. Ace Ventura: Pet Detective is a comedy? Well, shocker there. Start funny, then get funnier. Just give the audience what they want, and they'll love it. Still, it only works if the rest of the movie fulfills the expectations that are set by the start and answers any questions that the audience might have. A great example of this is the freaking Matrix. The Matrix is a masterclass in adhering to this rule, since the opening introduces a bunch of wacky stuff that we don't immediately understand. Wall running, gravity manipulation, long jumps across buildings, and then Trinity just disappears into thin air. Every first-time viewer probably thought, what the hell is this? That was kind of cool, actually. I hope the rest of the movie lives up to this. And lucky for them, not only does the film live up to the beginning, it exceeds it. Throughout the movie, every crazy new thing that we saw in the intro is broken down and explained to us. Neo learns how it's all possible, and so do we. If you couldn't already tell, I love this movie. But as far as the most important part of a movie goes, a lot of filmmakers would probably give some cop-out answer like, well, it's so obvious. Every part of a movie is equally as important to each other. But I want to be a little bit more specific. The beginning of a movie is the most important because it sets an expectation of how good the rest of it will be. So Acts 2 and 3 need to fulfill those expectations so that as the movie goes on, the stakes get higher, or the action, music, or the comedy gets better, and doesn't suddenly drop off. This will make the end of Act 3 feel more natural and deserved, bringing everything to a satisfying close. Unlike the ending of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, which was just a few long, drawn-out action scenes with no stakes, why is Anakin here? Why did Qui-Gon bring a literal child to a large-scale conflict? Of course he somehow destroys the Federation ship. How is Jar Jar not dead? If any of this shit happened in Star Wars today, people would be rioting in the streets. Why does Darth Maul just watch as Obi-Wan flips over and do nothing to stop him? Guys, this movie's not good. None of it even matters in the next movie since all the vital information is brought up anyway. But don't take my word for it. I don't like Star Wars. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with me? I'm curious. Do you think the first 20 to 30 minutes, or debatably all of Act 1, is the most important part? The 20 minutes can scale up a little bit if the movie is 3 hours, which, understandable, I guess. And I've asked my friends this question multiple times, and they think I'm absolutely crazy for this 20-minute take, but who knows, because I asked a film professor once, and he said that he thought my 20-minute rule makes sense. So I know I'm not alone. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious what you guys think, but with that, I'm going to bed. I'm tired, so I'll see you guys later. My bed's right there.